Okay, so when you think of mouthwash, you probably imagine fresh breath, killing germs, maybe that cool burning sensation in the morning. And for decades, it's been marketed as something simple and harmless, an easy way to keep your mouth clean and fresh. And I used to think the same. As a dentist, I've recommended mouthwash to plenty of patients, and I even use it myself. But here's the surprising part. Over the last few years, there were some studies that suggested that daily use of antiseptic mouthwash might be linked to a higher blood pressure. Not a dramatic spike overnight, but small measurable increases that caught the attention of cardiovascular researchers. So I decided to look into the research myself because anything that links the mouth to overall health is worth paying attention to. Now, to be clear, the science isn't settled here. These are small, short-term studies, and no one is saying mouthwash alone causes high blood pressure, but the possibility that something millions of people use could interfere with the body's natural systems, that's worth understanding and paying attention to. In this video, I'll break down what the researchers have discovered, what remains uncertain, and what it actually means if you use mouthwash regularly. Now, you might be wondering, how did mouthwash, out of all things, end up on the scientists' radar for blood pressure? And for me, it first came up when I noticed a few studies tucked away in journals I don't normally read as a dentist. And the idea made me stop because mouthwash is something millions of us use every day without thinking. And what those early papers found was strange. People who rinsed daily with antiseptic mouthwash seemed to lose some of the natural blood pressure lowering benefits you'd expect after things like exercise or eating nitrate-rich foods, so things like spinach or beetroot. And that raised a much bigger question. Could something as ordinary as mouthwash be quietly interfering with the body's natural ability to regulate blood pressure? And the researchers decided to test it in controlled trials. And what they found, well, it even surprised them. So what did the research actually show? Let's walk through it step by step. Now, back in 2019, researchers ran a short control trial and they found measurable changes in blood pressure. Now, it was a small but tightly controlled study in Free Radical Biology and Medicine 2019. And what they did is they enrolled a little over 20 healthy adults in their 20s and 30s with normal blood pressure. And participants used a chlorhexidine mouthwash. That's a prescription strength antiseptic, twice a day for 7 days. And they measured two things before and after: salivary nitrite, which is the immediate fuel your body uses to make nitric oxide, the molecule that helps relax blood vessels, and systolic blood pressure, which is a number on top of a blood pressure reading. Now, just after 1 week, salivary nitrite dropped and the average systolic blood pressure rose by 2 to 3 millimeters of mercury. And the authors wrote, chlorhexidine used twice daily resulted in a significant decrease in salivary nitrite. Now, back in 2018, there was a double-blind placebo-controlled study which showed that the benefits of exercise were actually blunted when people used antiseptic mouthwash. And that was published in the Journal of Hypertension 2018, where they had 23 healthy adults complete a standardized treadmill workout. And that's the kind that normally triggers a few hours of post-exercise hypotension, which is a natural blood pressure drop driven partly by the nitric oxide. And immediately afterward, they rinsed with either an antiseptic mouthwash or a placebo with no antibacterial effect in the double-blind design. With the placebo, the systolic blood pressure fell by roughly 5 millimeters of mercury over the next couple of hours, exactly what you'd expect. But with the antiseptic rinse, the drop was cut by almost half. And as the authors put it, the decrease in systolic blood pressure after exercise was significantly lower following mouthwash use compared to placebo. In plain terms, the rinse blunted one of the healthiest cardiovascular responses your body has after exercise. Now, we should be balanced. These are small, short duration studies. They don't prove that long-term mouthwash use causes hypertension. But when independent trials keep showing the same direction of effect, it's a signal worth understanding. And that sets up the obvious question: how could a mouthwash rinse affect blood vessels at all? And to answer it, we need to look at the nitrate, nitrite, nitric oxide pathway and what happens when you wipe out the bacteria that run the first step. So different teams, different years, different methods, same short-term signal. When nitrite drops, blood pressure tends to tick upwards. Now, we should be balanced. These are small, short duration studies. They do not prove that mouthwash causes hypertension, but when independent trials keep showing the same direction of effect, it's a signal worth understanding. And that sets up the obvious question: how could a mouth rinse affect blood vessels at all? And to answer it, we need to look at the nitrate, nitrite, nitric oxide pathway and what happens when you wipe out the bacteria that run the first step. And the answer here lies in the body's most important molecules, nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide is a gas that your body makes naturally. It's tiny but powerful. It relaxes blood vessels, improves circulation, and helps keep blood pressure under control. And in fact, the discovery of its role in the cardiovascular system was so groundbreaking that it won Nobel Prize in 1998. Now, here's the surprising part. The very first step of making nitric oxide doesn't start in your blood vessels, it starts in your mouth. And when you eat nitrate-rich foods, so things like beetroot, spinach, lettuce, those nitrates circulate in your saliva, and certain bacteria on the back of your tongue convert these nitrates to nitrites. And when you swallow, these nitrites are absorbed and turned into nitric oxide in the bloodstream. And that nitric oxide then tells the blood vessels to relax. Now, the way I would think of it is like a relay race. So the nitrates from the food are the first runner, and the tongue bacteria are the second runner, converting nitrates to nitrites. And the body finishes the race by turning those nitrites into nitric oxide, therefore lowering blood pressure. But here's the problem. If you wipe out those tongue bacteria with a strong antiseptic mouthwash, the baton may never get past. No bacteria means no nitrite, less nitrite means less nitric oxide, and without that signal, blood pressure may rise slightly in the short term. And that's what we saw in these studies. And this nitrate, nitrite, nitric oxide pathway has been studied for years in exercise science and cardiovascular medicine. And it's the same mechanism researchers use to explain why, for example, beetroot juice can lower blood pressure and improve performance. Athletes literally rely on it. And it's the same pathway that gets disrupted when you rinse twice a day with a strong antiseptic mouthwash. And that's why those studies I mentioned earlier didn't just see a random blip, they measured salivary nitrite and it fell. They measured blood pressure and it rose. So while the studies were small and short term, the mechanism makes biological sense. It's not just coincidence, it's a plausible chain of cause and effect linking your mouth bacteria to your cardiovascular system. Now, before we get carried away, we need to step back and look at what those studies don't prove. And the first thing is the sample sizes were tiny. Most involved fewer than 50 people, often young and healthy volunteers. And that means we can't assume the same effects would apply to older adults, people with medical conditions, or across the whole population. And the second thing is the trials were short term. We're talking days or weeks of rinsing, not years. So we don't know whether those small blood pressure changes persist, whether the body adapts, or whether the effect fades over time. And the third thing, and this is key, is that association doesn't mean causation. Just because lower nitrite and slightly higher blood pressure lined up in those trials, that doesn't prove mouthwash directly causes hypertension. And let's not forget the confounding factors. So blood pressure is influenced by dozens of things: diet, stress, sleep, genetics, exercise. It's unrealistic to suggest that a single product explains everything. And finally, the studies looked at specific products. Chlorhexidine is prescription strength and far more powerful than over-the-counter rinses. Essential oil formulas like Listerine may act differently. Alcohol-free mild rinses might be less disruptive. It's not a one-size-fits-all. So the bottom line is this: the evidence shows a signal, it raises an important question, but doesn't give us a final answer. So who actually needs to care about this? Because let's be honest, not everyone who uses mouthwash is going to see their blood pressure change. And the first group is people who already have high blood pressure or who are already at higher risk. If you're on medication for hypertension or you've been told to watch your numbers, it's worth being cautious about anything that might nudge that blood pressure upward even slightly. And the second group are people who use antiseptic mouthwash multiple times a day, every day. But also keep in mind, using a strong rinse once in a while is unlikely to cause problems. But heavy daily use may be enough to interfere with that nitrate, nitrite, nitric oxide pathway. And the third group are athletes or anyone who relies on nitric oxide for performance and recovery. And finally, anyone who assumes mouthwash is a substitute for brushing and flossing. Mouthwash was never designed to replace mechanical cleaning. It can be useful for specific conditions like gum inflammation after dental surgery or when recommended and advised by your dentist. But for most people, daily antiseptic rinses aren't necessary. So the takeaway is simple: mouthwash has its role in dentistry, but daily antiseptic use isn't essential for everyone. And this is it for now. Thank you for watching.